Welcome to Stifel's Sightlines podcast, focusing each week on a topic or two important to investors. Well, greetings and welcome to the Sightlines podcast. This is Michael O'Keefe, Stifel's Chief Investment Officer. Hey, in the last few episodes, we've gotten into some things that are relatively short-term in nature: Fed rate cuts, global risks, kind of watching the environment, the current environment. And, as I thought about this week, this episode, I wanted to sort of recognize that many of us, most of us really, are long-term investors. And so while it's important to keep a hand on what's going on, keep a pace of what's happening, it's also really important to kind of have a long-term perspective, right? And so I thought, let me take the opportunity to essentially review at a pretty high level a recently published update that we've done to our long-term investment themes. It's a report we call From Vision to Value, our long-term investment themes. And we update it from time to time. So it's been recently updated. And essentially, the idea with this is we develop these and themes that we think of them as these trends, almost mega trends that we think are going to influence the economy and the markets longer term. And so, if we've sort of framed this up, you can think of it as this helps us think about that future, helps us try to understand how things are changing, help us try to understand and sort of identify where companies and businesses are taking advantage of some of these shifts. So it influences our long-term thinking, influences how we're thinking about investing, all that kind of thing. So anyway, as it relates to the report, then we sort of anchor it, all the work in these 5 different themes. I'm just going to walk through them one at a time, share a couple illustrations. And again, I invite you to go to stifelinsights.com, and you'll see pretty prominently there a link to this report. Anyway, the first one I'll mention is the Fourth Industrial Revolution. This is the idea that technological innovation is breaking down the boundaries between the physical, digital, and biological worlds. And I think we all know that. We see it all happening around us, and sort of our lives are being so affected by technology. Obviously, in the center of that, in a way, although this concept spans all of our themes in a way, is artificial intelligence, right? That's an anchor to this theme and sprinkled into and sort of influences the others. We know that things like quantum computing are in play. That's really a huge leap in computing power if that ever gets done. And of course, that would in turn make AI even more productive, more efficient, and effective. And then as it relates to how this technology and sometimes AI is influencing things, as we've actually talked about, think of areas like healthcare, aerospace, or even farming being influenced by this. So next up, second theme is securing strategic resources. So this is the idea that there are industries, resources and services that are actually quite critical. And so you can think about basic things like power, food and water are important resources. And so the idea with this theme are, I guess, a few things. That companies and governments both are prioritizing the development and protection of these critical industries, resources, and services. So power is a good example, just to dive into that. Interestingly, nuclear power is coming online. Sort of nuclear power is back, and that's sort of being more welcomed than maybe in recent past because of the increased demand for energy that includes the use of energy in data centers to support artificial intelligence. Another, sort of area in terms of strategic resources, there's a bunch of basically raw materials that have been identified as critical to the digital economy, and some of them have limited supply. So how do we get them? Things like that. So that's another sort of example of what's in focus for securing strategic resources. Next up is shifting demographics. This is where changes in the global population dynamics will bring about challenges and opportunities. So a couple notable items here: millennials they've surpassed baby boomers as the largest generation and are entering their prime as household formation. So they're basically getting married, having kids, buying homes, and sort of engaged in their lives, and sort of watching how they consume and utilize services, and the shifts that might happen as a result of that is one example of what's important. Anyway, another simple data point is that Americans are living longer, and so there's an estimate that the number of centenarians, so people over 100, will quadruple over the next 30 years. So people living longer. Next up, the new consumers. So this is the idea that consumer preferences, expectations, and behavior are altering business models and corporate strategies. So a simple example, I still think this is kind of interesting. Contactless shopping, the idea of walking into a store, grabbing what you need, and taking off without checking out, that the systems are going to be able to monitor you, watch what you're taking, know who you are, and basically charge you. And this, for example, is sort of amplifying the idea of a cashless society. In any event, another example, which is a little bit technology too, drone delivery, right? Just the ability to get orders fulfilled even more quickly through the use of technology like drones. Anyway, finally, productive competition. This is a concept that relates to the idea that rivalry, people competing, work harder because they're competing. And that effort ultimately drives innovation and improves the quality of life and creates value for consumers, creates value into the economy. And so one example of that that's sort of come to the forefront, we introduced in this latest update to the report, is the space race. Basically, we've got not only governments, right, NASA, the European Space Agency, and now other countries putting forward space efforts. We also have a ton of private companies trying to do the same thing. So there's more satellites going up, and talk about different kinds of long missions and sort of tapping resources in space and all that. And so that's an example of the kind of thing we're going to see in terms of competition, and in turn that effort to compete, making us more innovative and better. So listen, that's what I wanted to cover this week, sort of a long-term concept. As I said a moment ago, I very much encourage you to go to stifelinsights.com, check out the link to this report. A lot of interesting facts in there. And so thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Thanks again for listening to Stifel's Sightlines. Be sure to subscribe wherever you're listening to automatically receive each week's podcast in your feed.